Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Shelf Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at the game of City of the Great Machine. Now, City of the Great Machine is an asymmetric, hidden movement, team-based game where one player is going to take the team of this great machine itself, which is a one-player team, and your basic objective is you're trying to bring out your master plan, while the other 1 through 3 players are going to take control of the other team, which is the team of the rebels, which are trying to bring down the great machine. Because unknowns to the mass populace of this city is that the great machine has evil intentions for the populace. It has found out that mankind is flawed and its only objective is to bring about its master plan of reprogramming all of mankind. While our heroes had found out that this is what's going to occur, so they're trying to bring about 3 riots in the city. If they manage to bring about 3 riots before the great machine can bring its master plan into effect, the heroes will start a rebellion which will bring down the great machine, stop its horrible evil plan, and save all of humanity, or at least this time until the next dystopian mastermind rears its ugly head. So this video is part of a video series looking at the game of City of the Great Machine, and in this video I'm going to teach you actually how to play the game. But if you just want a quick overview, you want to see some sample gameplay, or you just want to get a full review of the game, check out the videos in the series. Again, come on back after the break for a full tutorial of City of the Great Machine. Now, before we start this tutorial video, it's important to understand 2 really good important concepts. First of all, this tutorial video is based on a prototype of the game. So that means that the components you see right here, while they are pretty close to what the final production will look like, there may be some subtle changes which may come out as the game is finally released. Additionally, since this game is based on a prototype, there may be some changes to the rules or things might change. Knowing the company that put out this game and the designer of the game, I seriously doubt there's going to be any major changes, but there may be 1 or 2 minor things. If that does happen, I will definitely put some updates in the comments of the YouTube video description down below. So if you do watch this video and you notice any discrepancies in the rules, check out the show notes down below to see if there's anything that's managed to change, and I will definitely make sure to highlight, document, and put any changes that may be happening for the rules down in the show notes down below. Check those out, and now let's go ahead and start the full tutorial for City of the Great Machine. So City of the Great Machine, like I said, is an asymmetric team-based game, and the first thing we need to do is figure out which player is going to take over the role of the Great Machine, and which player or players, since this is a 2 to 4 player game, is going to take over the role of the rebellion. So if you decide that you are going to control the Great Machine, you are going to take 3 of the servants for the Great Machine, you're going to take 3 raid tokens, you're going to take the deck of directive cards, while the hero or the heroes are going to figure out what exact team that they're going to bring to the table. Now, this is the game is always going to play with 3 heroes, and it's always going to play 3 servants for the Great Machine, 3 heroes for the rebellion. But you may want to make sure that either if you're playing 1, 2, or 3 players, you want to decide how do you want to figure out which team of heroes you're going to pick. Now, you can just randomize them and randomly select which heroes you want to control, or you can allow each single player to pick out their hero, and it does matter because every one of these heroes is going to play differently. Every one of these heroes has their own special power, which is unique to that special hero. Every one of these heroes has their own unique initiative, which is going to be very important when I explain how the hero phases are going to occur. Additionally, every single hero is going to have a maximum amount of trust that they can ever contain. Trust is the currency for the heroes. Bonds is the currency for the Great Machine. I'll explain how that all works when we get to that point. And finally, it's also going to signify which starting location in the city you're going to start in. So the game does come with 6 heroes. You want to make sure you pick out 3 heroes, and every single one of the heroes wants to make sure that they get their individual deck of access cards. Now, the back of every one of these access cards does match the hero, but right now, without any expansions yet available for the game, every one of these access decks is going to be exactly the same for all of our heroes. The back sides are going to represent the heroes, but the front sides are going to represent the various different locations in the city itself. Now, the city itself must be built every time you play the game because this game is modular. Every one of these city pieces, not only do they have different benefits, different powers, and different abilities, they also have a certain amount of famous heroes and famous citizens that can be in the location. But most importantly, you need to build this board before you start even playing the game. Now, the game does come with a rule book and additional reference guide, which will give you some basic setups when you're first learning the game, and it's going to tell you some random or some specific setups for various different games when you're learning how to play the game. There are also some rules I'm not going to cover in this video because it's beyond the scope of the video, but it's going to tell you how to start making some random setups. Now, the reason why I'm not going to cover it is because I highly recommend you use those specific setups when you start learning how to play the game, because it's going to help you understand the game. And when you have a randomized setup, it does add extra challenges, and not understanding enough about the game is going to add complication where you don't need to understand, or where you don't need to be adding extra complication. So please pick one of those starting city layouts. Once you picked out that starting city layout, you're simply going to lay out your board, and the next thing you need to do is you need to seed the board with all the famous citizens. You need to seed the board with all the guards, and I'm going to explain how you do that here really quick. But first, before we go anywhere, let me explain how every one of these individual city boards work. You're going to notice there's two different kinds of city boards. There's a minor district and there is a major district. And the way you tell the difference between a minor and a major district is going to be the color of the symbol that happens to be up here in the right hand corner. Now, if you have different troubles differentiating colors, don't worry about it. These boards actually have a slightly different cutout to them, even though they all match up on their sides. And they also have a slightly different layout over here on the lower right corner, or on the complete bottom row when it shows you how to put the famous citizens on the board. So you have trouble with colors, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, but if you can tell the difference, major districts are going to be in green and minor districts are going to be in brown. Additionally, along the side here, you're going to see a spot where all the guards can go for the game. Now understand there's a difference between the guards, which are controlled by the Great Machine, and there are also the servants, which are also controlled by the Great Machine. Now the Great Machine starts the game in the basic game rules with 3 servants, and the Great Machine is going to start with 18 guards. Now every one of these districts, whether it happens to be a minor district or if it happens to be a major district, is going to start with 2 guards on it. The big difference here you need to understand is that the max amount of guards that can ever be in a minor district is 5 guards total, because you can move your guards around on the board, and the max amount of guards you can ever have in a major district happens to be 4, because you see that there's only 4 slots for the guards in the major district. Additionally, you're going to see slots along the bottom, which are going to be spaces for the famous citizens. Now the famous citizens come in values anywhere from a value of 1, which means that they are quite ready to join the rebellion very early in the game, or all the way up to level 5, which means they're not quite ready to join the rebellion because they're enjoying their luxurious lifestyle. These are basically the nobles of the city, and it's going to take a heck of a lot of pressure to make them want to join the rebellion. Additionally, you need to be very, very careful, because there are also traitors who are traitors to the cause of humanity. These are people who want to see the Great Machine's future, and they're going to do anything they can to bring about that future any way they can. Basically, they're working against the heroes, and they're definitely working for the Great Machine. At the start of the game, after you build the city and figure out which kind of city layout you want to have, you are going to place all the famous citizens face down, which means you're going to see that they all have the same back face up, and then you're going to randomize all these, and you're going to use all of them except for 3, and you're going to place them on all the slots on the city boards themselves. Now the minor districts have 4 slots, and the major districts has 1 slot for famous citizens at the start of the game. And the way you can tell is that there is a slight blue outline, and there's also going to be this little blue dot in the center, which means that that spot is going to get a famous citizen at the start of the game. Additionally, you're going to notice there's a green square in the lower left-hand corner of every one of these locations, and you want to make sure that when you put these famous citizens on every one of these blue sections, you want to make sure that you are covering that green dot. Now the reason why you want to cover that green dot is when a hero, one of the rebellion players, performs an action which allows them to see which famous citizen is actually in that spot. After they look at that, they're going to place that famous citizen back face down, and when they do that, they're going to turn it sideways just to let them know, so they can see the green dial there, or that green square. What that signifies is that there's ever a famous citizen where that green square is showing, that means that any player on the hero side, on the rebellion side, at any time can look at the face value of that famous citizen and put it back face down. It's very important to understand at any time, if one of these is facing like this, any hero on the hero team, doesn't matter which players, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 heroes, they can always look at that famous citizen. It doesn't even matter if it was another hero who revealed it, because basically they're all on the same side, they're using their walkie-talkies, they're talking back and forth, and they're relaying information. But again, at the start of the game, none of the famous citizens are known to any of our heroes. None of the famous citizens are known to the Great Machine, and it's very, very hard for the Great Machine to ever figure out who these citizens are. It's going to cost actions and deception and wiles for the Great Machine to figure out who these people are, while the heroes are slowly going to learn who all the famous citizens are and at what level they're ready to join the rebellion. Now the victory conditions for both of our teams is going to be tracked by this wheel right here. Now this wheel has 2 layers to it. You're going to have 1 layer which is going to represent the track for the Great Machine itself, and you're going to see this red light is going to point to any one of the 12 clock faces, anywhere from 1 to 12. At the start of the game, we're going to start at level 3. But this game does have the ability for you to modify the difficulty levels based on which team is controlled by which player. If you have a player who is very familiar with the rules, has played the game a lot of times, and is very good at their team of playing the Great Machine, You may want to make it more difficult for them by lowering the difficulty number, which makes it harder for the Great Machine to win because it can take them longer to get to that victory condition. But what it does is it gives the heroes more opportunities to take actions. But if you have two very, very even teams where the Great Machine and the hero players are pretty evenly matched, you're going to start the game at level 3 every single time you play the game. Again, if you want to make it easier, go to level 2, and that makes it easier for the heroes. If you want to make it very much easier for the heroes, you're just simply going to go to level number 1. Additionally, you're going to have the secondary track right here, which tracks the descent level currently of the city. This descent level is going to start right here if the heroes are controlled by 1 player. Descent level is going to start here if the hero team is controlled by 2 players. And the descent level is going to start here if the hero team starts with 3 players. Additionally, this wheel is going to signify which level of the famous citizens are ready to join the rebellion. For example, if we get the descent track to here, whether it's this spot, or this spot, we know that all level 1 famous citizens are now ready to join the rebellion. Additionally, you're going to notice that there's a number here on the outside which is going to signify how many bonds the Great Machine gets every single turn. As the descent level goes up, the Great Machine is going to start putting more resources to shutting down the rebellion. So as the rebellion gets more powerful, the Great Machine is going to get more and more bonds every single turn to perform their actions. There are actions that are going to allow the rebellion to raise the track. There are also going to be actions that allow the Great Machine to lower the track. The most important thing to understand here, though, is that if the track ever gets up to the max level, 2 things are going to happen at this point. 1, this counts as 1 automatic raid by our heroes, and this cannot be taken away by the Great Machine. Additionally, once the track gets to this point, it can never go back down again. So as the Great Machine, you want to make sure this doesn't happen, because once this happens, this is going to count as 1 of the 3 mandatory raids for the heroes. So that means that the heroes are much closer to winning the game. But it also does mean that the Great Machine is going to get 12 bonds every single round. But again, if it hasn't reached that point yet, it's going to bounce back and forth, up and down, as the players do their actions based on their teams. But again, once we get up to this point, this does mean that every one of the famous citizens, except a trader, is willing to join the rebellion, because their level 5 citizens, level 4, 3, 2, and level 1 citizens are ready to join the rebellion. But if the descent track is currently over here, that means that only level 3, level 2, and level 1 citizens are ready to join the rebellion. This also means at the start of the game, if we're playing with 3 heroes, no citizens are ready to join the rebellion, and it also means that the Great Machine is going to start every single round with 6 trust. That's how that wheel works. Let's go ahead and explain the rest of the rules for the game. After the Great Machine player has their 3 servants, their 3 raid tokens, and their directive deck, and the heroes, the rebellion players, have figured out exactly which heroes they want to control, whether they do so by random or if they decide to do so by specifically every single hero picking out, or every single player picking out which hero they're going to control. We're simply going to separate. The heroes are going to take their hero pieces, and the Great Machine is going to take their Great Machine pieces. Don't forget that the heroes also may need to make sure that they claim their raid tokens. Again, the game only comes with 2 raid tokens, because the moment the 3rd raid is performed, the heroes instantly win the game. So you don't need a 3rd raid token. Don't look for it. It's not on the box. It's not really needed, because again, once that 3rd raid happens, instant victory for our heroes. Now that we've got our board set up based on choosing one of the maps in the reference guide, next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we add our heroes onto the board, and every one of our heroes is going to start on a location based on our hero sheet itself. For example, we see that this hero, the veteran right here, is going to start over in the industrial district. And we see that symbol right here matches this symbol on the city. We see that the Fowler is going to start in this location right here, which is the Commerce District. Again, this symbol matches this symbol right here. And then finally, the Vagabond is going to start in Central Square. Again, this symbol matches this symbol right here. After that's done, all 3 of the servants of the Great Machine are going to start in the Grand Citadel. Remember, the Grand Citadel is where where the Great Machine starts with all of their servants. The heroes are always going to start in different locations based on the heroes that are chosen for that game. After the board is set up, making sure that we have 2 guards in every one of the districts, making sure that we have 4 famous citizens in all the minor districts, 1 famous citizen in every one of the major districts, and that we have 3 famous citizens who are off the side of the board, representing the famous citizens who are currently in jail, who will also remain face down, and also understand that any famous citizen who is in jail will always remain face down. Even if at a future date the Great Machine performs an action to arrest a citizen, they will go to the jail face down, and all the citizens in the jail are going to be randomized, so we don't know which citizen was just added, because actions from the heroes are going to bring famous citizens back onto the board, which means that the heroes may accidentally bring a traitor back out. Hopefully not for our heroes, but it can happen depending on the actions of the game. Again, it's probably not going to happen because the Great Machine isn't going to arrest a traitor. So most likely it's going to be anywhere from a level to 1 to 5, but just want to make sure you understand how the game plays. There's only a couple things left to do for setup. Any heroes that are not going to be used in this game can be removed from the game. I'm just going to leave them out on the table here so you can see what those heroes look like. Next thing that's going to happen is every one of the hero players is going to take their entire deck of access cards, which should be 9 cards. Again, every one of these access cards represents one of the individual locations on the board. So every one of these cards does match one of the locations out there. Anyways, after that's done, the heroes are going to shuffle up their deck of access cards, and they are going to randomly remove one of those cards, and they're going to place it face down. The heroes at any time are allowed to look at any other hero's access card, including their own, but the Great Machine is never allowed to look at that access card. And what this does is this creates a challenge for the heroes, because this is one location that the heroes cannot access at the start of the game. Heroes can gain these access cards back, and the Great Machine can steal additional access cards, but this is going to hamper the locations that the heroes can start the game out with. It's going to also influence their decisions and influence their tactics. Again, 1 card for every one of our heroes. And again, I must emphasize, all the heroes can look at these cards at all the time. They're always kept face down, so the Great Machine never knows which one of these cards are at those locations. It adds to the cat and mouse rules of the game, which means that the Great Machine never is 100% sure where all the heroes can go at any time, while the heroes know that knowledge, and they can share that knowledge, and they use that knowledge to act on all their strategy and tactics. Finally, the last thing we need to do is we need to shuffle the directive deck for the Great Machine. Now, the Great Machine does not start with any of these directive cards. They need to earn these cards by going to a certain location on the board. But these directive cards are going to give the Great Machine powers, add to the symmetry of the game. And the interesting thing about these directive cards, if the Great Machine ever loses a directive card from the heroes performing an action, it's removed from the game. You don't get it back. So make sure you're being very smart as a Great Machine player with these directive cards, because they're very, very powerful. Sometimes so powerful that the heroes will definitely get them removed from the game very, very quickly. So use them smartly. The only thing left to do for a setup is we need to build the city event deck. Now, the city event deck is going to add a lot of variety and a lot of replay to the game, because it's going to change up the rules and the strategies. It's also going to influence how the Great Machine is earning its victory points every single round. You're going to notice that there's 3 different kinds of city event decks. You have the countdown, which is included in every single game. You have city event level 2, which comes with 10 cards in that deck. And you have city event level 1, which is also going to come with 10 cards in that deck. Every single time you play the game, you're going to start with this city event deck called the countdown. It's going to be on the bottom of the pile. Then we're going to shuffle all 10 of the city event level 2 cards. We're going to take 6 of them, place them on top of the city event card for the countdown deck, and the other 4 cards are going to be removed from the game. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing for the city event level 1 cards. We're going to shuffle all 10 of them, grab 6, add them to the top of the city event level 2 cards. Again, we're not going to shuffle in. This ensures that we're going to go through all 6 level 1 city events, all 6 level 2 city events, and then finally the countdown card in that order. And again, any of the city event cards that are not used are going to be removed from the game. They're also going to be removed from the game face down, so this Great Machine and the hero players have no idea which city event cards are not involved in the game. So this is a good time for me to explain a couple differences between the city event cards, and then we'll go ahead and explain exactly how the game itself plays. Now, there's 2 different kinds of city event cards in the game. There's the city event cards that's going to say during this round only. Then there's the city event cards that say at the end of this round only. All city event cards, though, at the bottom are going to list what the master plan is going to advance if this criteria is true at the end of the round. And basically, this is what the Great Machine is trying to make happen every single round. That's going to allow their master plan to advance 1 level. And this is also what the heroes are trying to stop from happening to make sure the master plan doesn't advance this round. Now, this isn't the only way the master plan can advance, but this is one of the strong ways that is going to happen. So understand that this is going to influence the strategies and the tactics of every single round, every time you play the game. The important thing to understand about the 2 differences, though, is that during this round only means that this is going to change one of the rules for this specific round of the game. Now, there's only ever 1 city event card in play at any time. Once that round is over, that city event card is also over. It's not going to return to the game. So there's only 1 possible during this round rule ever in play at a time. Additionally, you're going to see some of the cards that say at the end of this round only, which means it's going to be a caveat that occurs at the end of the round. If that manages to happen, then that means that's what's going to happen in that specific round. So just make sure you pay attention when you reveal a city event card. If it says during this round only, make sure you read it to all the players and make sure all the players understand this is going to change one of the rules for the round. If it says at the end of this round only, it just understand this is going to create something that's going to happen at the end of the round. And then finally, make sure all the players understand what the master plan event is for this round. So heroes can try to make sure this doesn't happen, while the great machine can try to make sure it happens, to make sure that they win the game. If this event does happen, that does mean that the track is going to advance one spot. So if the master plan track is currently at 3, and at the end of the round the master plan does advance due to whatever that event happens to be, it's going to go from 3 to 4. If it's at 4, it's going to go to 4 to 5. Also understand that the master plan track ever hits 12, it's instantly game over with the great machine winning the game. It's not going to be another round of play. Nothing else is going to happen like that. The moment the master plan track hits level 12, the game instantly ends with the great machine being the winner, and its dystopian future comes about and all of humanity is reprogrammed for the master plan of the great machine. Now, as I said earlier, there is a huge amount of time pressure on our heroes because, again, the countdown is always the final card in the game. If we ever get down to the countdown card, this is the city event card that's going to remain in the game for the rest of the game. It's never going to replace if we get to the 13th round. Once this appears, this is the city event for every single round. And as you can see, just by reading this card, you see that there's a heck of a lot of pressure on our heroes because it's now going to be very, very easy for the great machine to make us master plan work. So hopefully our heroes can win the game before this event happens, because much like a couple other hidden movement games, once the pressure's on, it's almost a foregone conclusion for one team. See, the great machine is played out over rounds, and every single round is broken down in individual phases. The first phase is the opening phase. It's going to be followed by the access phase, which is followed by the great machine phase, which is followed by the heroes phase, and then finally we're going to go to the closing phase where we're going to do some cleanup. And then remember, anytime victory can happen for whether it happens to be the heroes or the great machine. Remember, the great machine track ever gets to level 12, the great machine is going to instantly win. And there's ever a third riot in play or a second riot after the heroes manage to get the descent track all the way up to the max level. Remember, that does count as one of the 3 riots. That does mean the heroes are going to win the game. Every single round of the game is broken down into phases, and the very first phase is the opening phase. And during the opening phase, this is going to be the time where we're going to reveal the new city event. This is going to tell us what the great machine needs to do to make their master plan advance, or what the heroes need to do to stop that from happening. Additionally, this is going to tell you that there's going to be a during this round event, or if there's going to be an end of round event that's going to occur. After we revealed the city event card, the next thing we can do is the great machine player is going to gain their bonds, and the heroes are going to gain their trust. Now, the amount of trust we are going to gain and the amount of bonds we're going to gain is going to depend on the various amounts of board states. And it's very important to understand that trust is the hero's currency they do use to perform all actions, and bonds is the great machine's currency that they use to perform all their actions. Now, the nice thing about bonds and currency is unspent bonds and currency do carry over to future rounds. So if you have any left over, it does carry over. One of the negatives, though, is that while the great machine is unlimited on how many bonds they can ever have at any one time, that's not true for the heroes themselves. Every one of these heroes has a certain max amount of trust they can ever have. And if they ever get an action that gives them more trust than they're ever able to carry, they're going to lose the additional trust that they would have gained. For example, we see that the vagabond right here is allowed to have 8 trust. If she currently has 8 trust and somebody performs an action or an action occurs allows her to gain more trust, she is not going to gain any of that trust. The max amount she can ever have is going to be 8. And it is going to be varied for every one of our different heroes. Some go down as low as 6, some of them go all the way up to 8. Again, it's listed on the lower right hand corner of every one of our heroes. Now, the amount of trust that the heroes is going to gain is going to be based on the board state for the various sections of the city that hero happens to be in. And the amount of trust you're going to gain is going to be based on the amount of citizens that happen to be in that location that are not revealed traitors. So, for example, for this hero right here, we see that there are 4 famous citizens in this location. Even though one of the famous citizens is revealed, since that revealed one is not a traitor, that means that this player would gain 4 trust, so he'd simply gain 4 trust. Whereas opposed to the veteran, we see that since he has 4 famous citizens in his location, but one of them is a revealed traitor. Traitors never give trust to our heroes, so that means that this player is only going to gain 4 trust for the turn. Now, as the vagabond has 4 famous citizens in their location, even though all of them are unrevealed, they're going to gain 4 trust. It doesn't matter that one of them happens to also be a traitor. Since the traitor has not been revealed yet, they're not going to affect the amount of trust they're going to gain. So since all these are face down and there is no revealed traitor, they're going to get the full amount of trust they get at the start of every single opening phase. Now, the interesting thing is the amount of bonds that the great machine player is going to get is going to be based on the current amount of dissent that's existing in the city right now. And that's going to be listed on the top of this dial right here. So as this dial advances one spot at a time, every time the heroes gain 1 level of descent, this track is going to go up 1 level. You notice there's 3 levels of descent inside every section of this little pie slice right here. And that's going to give them the total amount of bonds that the great machine player is going to gain every turn. As soon as this advances into the next section, the amount of bonds we're going to gain is going to go up by a certain amount. It starts all the way down to 6. It does go all the way up to 12, which is the maximum amount that they can gain every turn. But again, don't forget the great machine has an unlimited amount of bonds they can have every single turn. Bonds carry over if they don't spend them. It's not quite true for our heroes, who are limited on the maximum amount of bonds based on their specific character sheet. Next up, we have the access phase. Now, during the access phase, this is when the heroes are going to program their moves for their turn. Now, the important thing about programming your moves is you're going to program your moves by using your access cards. The nice thing about the access cards is you can show the access cards to the rest of the heroes in your group at any time, and you can make plans and you can debate and do all the things you want to do. But the important thing to understand is that all discussion must occur in front of the great machine. It's not allowed in the rules for two people to leave the room, go inside the garage, go upstairs, go to a different part of the house, and plot together for what their actions they want to do on the turn. All plots and all decisions during the access phase must be discussed in front of the great machine player. But heroes are more than welcome to say stuff like, I will go here if you go to this location and if you do this specific action in this location. So you're more than welcome to do so, but once we do this, what's going to happen is all the heroes are simply going to take an access card. And this is the mandatory action location that we have to go to. Now, we don't have to do the location actually listed on the card, but we do have to actually go to that location. And the important thing to understand is traveling does use up our trust. So we want to make sure we're picking locations that we can actually access. If we need to move to a location that we don't have enough bonds to go to, we do get to roll the die, which is going to allow us to move additionally, but we'll cover that when we get to the movement. But the important thing to understand is that all the heroes simply go through all their access cards that they have available to them. Remember, all of our heroes did lose one access card at the beginning of the game, and we may lose additional access cards as the game goes, but once we picked our cards, we're simply going to place it face down. Now I'll just randomly pick one for every one of our heroes here, and let's go ahead and move on. That's complete the whole action for the access phase. After the access phase comes the great machines phase, and the great machine phase is where the great machine takes all their actions. Now, the very important thing to understand about the great machine phase is the great machine is actually not part of the board. The great machine is the player who controls the servants. All actions you perform as a great machine must be transferred through your servants or through your guards. The amount of actions the guards can do is extremely limited. Basically, the only thing they can do is block hero movement, and they can move to different locations on the board. Whereas opposed to the servants are actually going to do all of your actions. So if you want to do an action in this district right here, that means that one of your servants has to be in that location. If I want to do an action in this location here, yes, it does mean that my servant has to be there. And finally, if I want to do an action in this location, yes, my servant has to be there. If this is the current board state, on my turn as a great machine, I either have to perform move or spend bonds to do movement actions to get to other locations if I want to do so, or I have to keep my servants in the locations they're in and perform actions in the current locations. The important thing to understand, though, is that the way this is going to work is you're going to do movement first, then you're going to perform actions with a servant. So a servant cannot perform an action, then move. It's mandatory if they're going to move, they have to do their movement first, spending bonds to do so, then perform actions whatever section of the board they happen to be going to. Now, before we go any further in the tutorial, understand that any rule I'm about to present to you is probably going to be broken by a city event card, or it's going to be broken by a directive card. I'm not going to take the time to go over all the directive cards because they're extremely self-explanatory, and the city event cards are also extremely self-explanatory. So I'm going to cover the basic rules right here and understand that the directives and the city events are probably going to break these rules. But if you ever want to do any action with a servant itself, it's going to cost you 2 bonds to perform that action. You simply discard the bonds, and you will perform whatever action that happens to be. And the actions you perform with your servants is you can move into an adjoining section of the city. Again, discard 2 bonds and go ahead and do so. You can also move multiple sections by discarding multiple amounts of multiples of 2. So for example, if I have this servant in this location, and for some reason I want to get the servant all the way up here, I can spend 2, 4, and 6 bonds and do that route right here. Now, the cool thing to understand about this game is in the basic rules, all 3 of your servants have the exact same powers. So it'd probably be smart if I want to do something in this location just to spend 2 bonds and move this servant over here. But do understand that if you don't want to do that for various different reasons, you don't have to. Spend 2 bonds, move a servant out of its current location into an adjoining sector of the city, and you can do that as many times as you want, as long as you want to keep spending the bonds to do so. After a servant is done performing their action, they can perform one of their actions, whether it happens to be any actions available to any servant, or special actions are only available to various sections on the board. Now understand that any section that's a major section of the city, which remember those are the ones that have the green background, or less locations for the famous citizens. For example, this one only allows 2, that one only allows 2, but again, there's the Tower of Law, the Grand Citadel, the Central Square right here, and finally the Control Necklace. Those are the major districts of the city, and the Great Machine and the heroes can perform extra actions on specific locations. But let's go ahead and cover the various different actions you can do in those various different sections of the board. The very first one we're going to have is where you are going to have the Grand Citadel. If you have a servant in the Grand Citadel, you can simply discard 2 of your bonds, and then you can draw 1 of your directive cards. Now understand, again, like I said, you're not going to start with any of these directive cards, and you're always going to have to do an action in the Grand Citadel to draw 1 of these directive cards. Costs you 2 bonds to do so, and again, if you want to do this multiple times, that does mean that you have multiple servants in the Grand Citadel. If you have multiple servants and you're willing to spend 6 bonds, for example, I could have all 3 of these servants as their actions allow me to draw 1 directive card apiece, allow me to draw 3 directive cards if I want to. You can have an unlimited amount of directive cards in your hand, but you can never have more than 3 of them in play. The next location we have besides the Grand Citadel is going to be the Tower of Law. Now the Tower of Law is where we actually get to publish our directives. Publishing directives, also like any other action we're going to perform with our servants, is going to cost us 2 bonds. And when we publish these directives, it's going to allow us to put extra powers into play for our team. If the Great Machine player ever has any directive cards in their hand, and again, they have to be in your hand, they can't be in the draw pile, but if you have them in your hand, you can go to the Tower of Law and again spend 2 bonds and go ahead and put that directive in play. Now any directives put into play are going to be placed face up, and they're going to give you a permanent power until they're deactivated by the heroes. Now there's 2 ways heroes can deactivate them. I'll cover that when we get to that point. But one of the ways is they can discard them. If it ever says discard, that means we're going to lose that and it's going to be removed from the game. It does not go into a discard pile. The other way they can do is they can make us put them back into our hand. If we go back into our hand, we can again at a future time go back to the Tower of Law to get that directive back into play. Just understand these directives are all going to give us powers. They're usually long-lasting powers. They're going to make us much more powerful. So the heroes are definitely going to want to stop them as quickly as possible, and we can never have more than 3 of them in play at a time. If we ever have 3 of them in play and we want to publish a 4th directive, we simply just must, again, remember these are going to be played from our hand, even though I'm doing this from the draw deck here. They have to come from your hand. But if you ever want to put a 4th one into play, you must pick one of the prior ones to discard, and then you are simply going to replace it with the new directive that you want to put into play. Luckily for the Great Machine player, when you take a 4th directive to replace one of your directives out there, that directive actually isn't discarded. You actually get to get it back in your hand, which is very, very nice. So if I want to get this confiscate directive back into play, I can simply take one of the other directives, put that directive into play, and take the other directive back in my hand. Again, it's only when the heroes discard these do we have to worry about losing access to these directives. The next thing we can do is we can go to the control nexus. And again, we must have one of our servants in the control nexus. And the control nexus allows us to move the board around. Now, there's a couple of very important things to understand about when you're moving the board around. Understand this city is basically on gears. These are not flying platforms that are going to disengage and fly all over to move around, which basically means when you reposition sections of the board, it has to be able to legally move along the table with that location. So that means locations such as the central square here, since it's blocked in on all sides, I cannot move the central square location. Additionally, whenever you move a section of the board, it must reconnect back to the city in a way that connects the 2 districts. And you can never have one district or one section of the city connected to another section of the city by only one district. All districts must be accessible by 2 other districts, and we must make sure that when we're moving these districts around, we're at least moving around in a way that allows it to slide around the table. So again, that means central square cannot move, but this could move because I can slide it out this direction, this can move because I slide out this direction, and this right here can move because I can slide it out this direction. And you're simply going to go to this location, spend 2 of your bonds, and you're just going to reposition the boards any way you want. The only thing that's important to understand is that the board sections must be connected to at least 2 other sections, which means that this movement right here is not legal at all because this board section is no longer connected to 2 sections of the board. But I could move it all the way up here like this because this location is now connected to 2 sections of the board, meaning that this is the legal placement. And that's what we're going to do in the control nexus. Although to be fair, this actually would be an illegal move. I should have looked at the board state a little bit closer because now this board section is only connected to 1 section. Remember, each board section must be connected to 2. So that would actually not be a legal move at all to do. So I'd probably have to do something like moving this board section right here and moving it all the way up here, guaranteeing that all board sections are still connected to at least 2 sections of the board. That's the action we can take in the control nexus. The final special action that the Great Machine player can do is in the central square itself, and if they happen to have at least 1 other servant in the central square, they can take the action on the central square. Now this is the only action for the Great Machine that doesn't actually require bonds to perform. It actually gives you bonds, and the amount of bonds you are going to gain is going to be based on the amount of famous citizens versus the amount of guards you have in that current location. and the amount of bonds you're going to gain is going to be the difference. So if we have a situation here where these two famous citizens are not in this section of the central square, since we have 2 guards and 2 famous citizens, this actually will not give us any bonds at all. But if we have all 4 of these famous citizens, or if we happen to get a 5th famous citizen into that location, that means we would gain 3 bonds in this case. Or in this case, if we had the board state just like this, we would gain 2 bonds. Now again, don't forget the Great Machine is unlimited in the amount of bonds that they can ever keep in their bond bank. Now there's 3 actions left available to the Great Machine player, and the first action of these 3 is the ability to arrest famous citizens. If they're ever in a location with a face-up famous citizen, they can spend 2 bonds to arrest that famous citizen. When a famous citizen is arrested, they're removed from the board, placed in the jail, and then we are going to shuffle around the famous citizens that are currently in the jail. Because our heroes can break them out of jail, but they're never allowed to know which famous citizen is which. Some of these could be traitors, some of them could be level 5, some of them can be all the way down to level 1 famous citizens, but they're always going to remain face down as long as they're in the jail. When heroes break them out, and I'll explain how that works on a later part of the hero phase, they're going to randomly pick one of those and they're going to add them back on the board. But when they're arrested, you simply put them in jail face down. The next action we can perform is we can repair these guards that may be broken by our heroes. To repair any one of these guards, we are simply going to spend 2 bonds to repair them. And the way you signify if a guard is ever broken is if they're going to be face down. And to repair them, you simply spend 2 bonds to sand them back up. Now, why do you want to have guards? We'll explain them when we get to the hero phase, but just understand it's very easy to repair them. You just need to have your servant in the location, spend the bonds, and go ahead and repair that servant. The final action that we can do as the Great Machine is we can perform a raid in a location. And the way we perform a raid is we place that raid token in a location where we have a servant who has not taken another action. But I didn't make this clear earlier. Remember, every one of your servants is going to do 1 move action if you want, and then they're going to perform an action in any location in this city section that they happen to be in. They cannot take multiple actions, they cannot take multiple moves, and then actions and spin it or split it up in any way such as that. It's always move, then action. It's always 1 action. Of course, there are directive cards that are going to break that rule, but the basic rule says movement, then action, or just bypass the movement itself and simply perform an action. But the final action you get to do is you can lay a raid token down in a location, and you have to do it in a location where you currently have a servant. Now what you're doing when you're doing this is you are anticipating and hoping that one of the heroes has decided to move into that location. If they fail to do so before the end of the round, then that means the descent track is going to go up. But if they do happen to move in that location when the heroes get to the activation, that does mean that you're going to get some bonuses. I'll go and explain those bonuses right now. If your hero happens to move into a location where you currently have a raid token, then you as the Great Machine get to pick one of 2 options. The very first option you can pick is you can decide that you can advance the master plan by 1 level. And to do so, you're simply going to advance it from the current level up to the next level it needs to go to. And again, when we advance the master plan, we're trying to get to level 12. If it gets to level 12, even at this point, we are instantly going to win the game. The good news for the heroes, though, is that if the Great Machine chooses this option to advance the master plan by 1 level, the hero still gets to take their action in that location where the raid is performed. The alternate option, though, for the Great Machine to choose from is going to be option number B. Now, if the Great Machine chooses option number B, that means that player is not going to be able to perform any actions, and then the Great Machine gets to pick one of 2 different options at that point. They can either decide to steal all of that player's trust and turn every one of those trust points into bonds for them, or they can make that hero discard the access card they used to play to get into that location. When a hero player loses their access card, it's going to go over with the rest of the access cards that the heroes have lost. Luckily, our heroes can get back those access cards, but while that hero's access card is missing, that hero can no longer access that location. Granted, they still get to stay in that location for this round, but next turn they will have to leave because they won't have that access card available to them anymore. That's basically it for the Great Machine's turn. The Great Machine player, basically for their turn, is just going to spend 2 bonds to move their servants, 1 bond to move their guards, and once their servants have all moved, or once they don't want to spend any more actions, their turn is going to be over, and now we get to go to the hero phase. Now during the hero phase, every one of our heroes is going to reveal their access card, and that's the location they have to go to. This is not an option. They must go to that location. They cannot avoid doing so because this is the movement that they programmed in. And basically, we are going to reveal every one of our hero actions, and they're going to take their actions in initiative order from lowest initiative all the way to highest initiative among the heroes that happen to be playing. Now, your initiative is located in the upper right-hand corner of your player board, so this does show that the veteran is initiative 1, the prowler is initiative 2, and then finally the vagabond is initiative 4, which means the veteran is going to resolve first. Now the first thing we need to do is the hero needs to move from their current location to whatever access card they played. Now the nice thing here is you can play the access card for the location you're currently in, which means you can stay in your current location. but if you play an access card for a different location, you have to move that location. Now, every single hero is free to choose the route to the district that they specifically picked, but they must move to that specific district. Now, the way movement is going to work for heroes is heroes need to spend trust based on the amount of guards in every single district they want to leave in an effort to get to their target location. So, for example, we see right here that the veteran is currently in this location right here, which happens to be the industrial district. Since they played the access card for the industrial district, that means they get to stay here and they don't need to spend any of their trust on movement. After we resolve the movement, if it's going to occur for that specific hero, then that hero can perform an action at that location, whether it happens to be a specific action that's related to the location or one of the specific hero actions. I'll cover all those in just a moment, but after that's done, that hero's activation is done. Basically, it's movement and action if you want, and any trust that you don't spend is going to carry to the next round, as long as it's not more than the amount of trust that you're allowed to keep. The next hero, then initiative order, is then going to activate. And again, they need to find out which location that they were targeting, and then they need to move that location. So for example, we see right here that the Fowler has chosen the Science District. So they are currently in this location. For them to move all the way to the Science District is going to cost them a total amount of trust of 4. Because it costs them 2, or it costs them 1 trust for every guard in every district that they're leaving on the way to the target district. So to go from here to here would cost them 2 trust of their 4. Then to go from here to here would cost them an additional 2 trusts, using up all the trusts they have access to. But here's the trick and here's the challenge, and this is the way that the Great Machine can start playing, and playing smart and making life difficult for our heroes, because during the Great Machine's turn, the Great Machine can move the guards. Now, to move a guard, it simply costs 1 trust for every district that guard wants to move. So for example, if during the Great Machine's turn, the Great Machine decided to move this guard from this location to here for 1 bond, and they decide to move this guard right here from this location to this location for 1 bond, now we see that the cost for the Fowler to move all the way to the Science District have gone up. And remember, you have to do your complete move. It's not an option. You're forced to do it. So now to go from here to here is going to cost 3 of our trust. We now have 1 trust left over. We have to continue moving, so we're going to move from here to here. Anytime we have to do a movement and we do not have enough trust to continue that movement, we will discard all of our remaining trusts, and then we need to roll the movement die. Every time we move from a district that we don't have any trust to pay for, we're going to roll the die every single time. So for example, we happen to be all the way back here during the start of a movement. We spent 1 trust to go here, 4 more trusts to go here, and now we are completely out of trust. We would go here and roll 1 die. But what if we had been all the way back here? We would spend 2 to leave here, spend a 3rd one to leave here, spend 3 more for a total of 6. Well, you see we don't have enough trust to leave this area, so now we need to roll the die for every single section of the city we want to leave. And there's basically 2 results on the die. We're either going to get away with it scot-free and nothing's going to happen, and we're going to move to the next location, or we're going to get arrested. If we get arrested, it's simply going to be like the standard detainment action I've already explained. The Great Machine gets to decide if they're going to detain the hero by advancing their plot, or if they're going to make the hero lose their trust, which isn't going to matter if they have no trust left. So the only thing left that they would probably choose at that point is to take their access card away from them. But again, that's going to be a choice by the Great Machine. But if our hero can keep rolling the escape, they can keep moving from district to district to district, as long as they keep rolling that escape all the way to their final target district. So now that I've explained movement for our heroes, now to explain all the movements that are available for our heroes. And the first action that's available to our heroes is we can go ahead and add some discontent into a section of the city that happens to be at that location for that hero. Now remember, there's all nice reminders in every one of these access cards that tells you what you can do in every one of these specific sections of the city, but the basic actions are in every single one of the minor sections of the city, you can spend 1 trust per guard to raise the discontent level up by 1. Now remember, the discontent level will be tracked on the board, and every time we raise it by 1 point, we're simply going to advance at 1 level. And remember, our eventual goal is to try to get all the way up here to the raid level, because once we do that, we have completed 1 of our riot locations. I said raid, sorry, I meant riot. Once we get up to the riot level, we've completed 1 of the 3 riots that are required for winning the game. But every time we raise the discontent 1 level, this is simply going to go up 1 point, which means that we're going to start getting access to more of the famous citizens willing to join the rebellion. And again, the amount of trust this is going to cost is based on the total amount of guards in a certain section of the city. So in this case, it would cost us 2 to go ahead and incite in this location. This means it would cost us 3. This means it would cost us 4. And remember, the max amount of guards we can ever have in a section for the Great Machine is listed on the left-hand side. So for example, this section can never have more than 5 guards inside it. We just can't access or move them in there. Now again, this is going to count the amount of active guards. If any guard happens to be broken, and I'll show you how to break guards in just a moment, but if any guards happen to be broken, they are not going to count towards the cost of doing actions. So we have a section of the city where all the guards have to be broken, That means the heroes get to perform all their actions in that location without spending any of their trust. So if you're the great machine, make sure you're fixing your robots, because as your guards break, actions get much easier for our heroes. Now, if your hero doesn't want to do the specific action for a specific section of the city, they're welcome to spend their trust on various different actions. Now, the first action we can perform in any section of the city is we can break a guard. So if a guard is standing up, it's currently active. If a guard is laying down, it's currently broken. Now, to break a guard, this is going to allow us to use the damage die to affect these guards. And basically, every single guard only has 1 hit point. And what we are going to do is, before we attack the guard, we are going to decide how much trust we are going to spend. We're going to spend anywhere from 2 to 4 trust. Well, I guess you can spend more than 4 trust. It'd be very silly because it's not going to give you anything. But the amount of trust we're going to spend is how much we're going to spend, and we need to decide that. Then we're going to roll the die. And this die has various faces all the way from 2 all the way up to number 4, and it finally has a shield face side on it. Now, if we roll the die and the amount of trust we spent is equal to or less, I'm sorry, let me say this properly. The amount of trust we spend is equal to or greater than the die face of the die that we rolled, then we are going to successfully break the machine. So what I'm trying to say here is, let's say before I attacked one of these guards with the Fowler right here, I decided I'm going to spend 3 trust to go ahead and attack the guard. Once I've locked in the amount of trust I'm going to spend to attack the guard, I'm going to roll the die. If I roll a 2, the guard is going to be successfully broken. If I roll a 3, the guard is going to be successfully broken because I spent 3 trust. But if I happen to roll the 4, I'm going to fail at attacking the guard, and my trust is wasted, and the guard is not going to be damaged at all. It's either all or nothing kind of thing. Additionally, there's also a shield face on the die, and anytime we roll the shield face, it doesn't matter how much trust we spend, we are automatically going to fail at attacking the guard. Luckily, we're not going to suffer any additional repercussions. The great machine is not going to get aware of our actions, but we're just going to fail at taking out that guard. The next action we can take is we can try to identify a famous citizen. Now, the amount of trust that's going to cost us to identify a famous citizen is going to be based on how many famous citizens we want to identify times the amount of guards that are currently in that location. So that does mean that if all the guards in a location are broken, that means since any number times 0 is going to be 0, we could identify all 4 of the famous citizens for 1 action. But if there happens to be 1 guard, it's going to cost us 1 trust for every famous citizen we want to identify. So if we happen to have only 1 trust, we can only identify 1 of the famous citizens there. But if we happen to have 3 trust and there's only 1 active guard in that location, we can identify up to 3 of these famous citizens. But if both these guards happen to be active and we only have 3 trust, that means it's going to cost us 2 trust per famous citizen. That means we could only identify 1 of the famous citizens by spending 2 trusts and picking 1 to identify. And when we identify a famous citizen, we will simply pick this up, and the heroes only get to look at this famous citizen and see the current value of this famous citizen. Once we see the current value of the famous citizen, we're going to place it back face down, again, never showing the value of that famous citizen to the great machine. Again, this is one of the secrets we get to keep from the great machine. But we're going to make sure when we place it back down, we're going to place it in a way that the notch is showing so we can see the green light below. Green means go. It's a nice reminder that the heroes at any time, doesn't matter which hero revealed it or where any of the heroes happen to be on the board, any hero at any time is free to pick up this famous citizen, have a look at the number as a reminder of what level that famous citizen happens to be, and then place it face back down, making sure to keep the green dot revealed at all times. The next action we do is we can move famous citizens. Now, the amount of trust it costs to move a famous citizen is going to be 1 trust per district we want to move it. And when we move famous citizens, we need to make sure that we're respecting the limits for certain sections of the board. For example, this board section never had more than 2 famous citizens, so I couldn't move the second famous citizen over there at all, because each section has a maximum amount of famous citizens it can have. But the cool thing to understand here is that when you move a famous citizen, they are going to keep their value. And they're also going to keep the fact that they're available to be viewed by all the heroes. What this basically means is that as you move around and you start discovering where the level 1 and the level 2 heroes, based on the current amount of discontent for the city, you can start maneuvering the level 1 heroes into a section of the city where you're playing to start the riot. That's the basic strategy of the game for the heroes. You want to get the heroes to identify the famous citizens, move them all to a certain section of the city without tipping your hand too much. Again, part of the cat and mouse strategies and the tactics, and then move one of your heroes into a section and perform a riot. And I guess this might be a good time to explain just how a riot works. Now, to start a riot in a section of the city, it's basically going to cost us 1 trust per unidentified famous citizen times the amount of guards that happen to be at a specific location on the board. So for example, this player right here, this hero wants to start a riot in this section of the board. Since we have 4 unidentified famous citizens and 1 guard in this location, it's going to cost us 4 trust to go ahead and do so. If there happened to be a second guard here and we had 4 unidentified citizens, it's going to cost us 8 trust to go ahead and do so. But if both of these guards happen to be broken, or if there happens to be no guards here at all, it's going to cost us 0 trust to perform a riot in this location. Or if we happen to have any famous citizens identified, for example, if we had this famous citizen identified, this one identified, and now we have this famous citizen identified, now the amount of trust we need to spend is going to go down quite a bit, because again, remember, it's based on the amount of famous citizens times the amount of guards and the amount of trust that's going to cost us, or in this case, only 2 trust to do so. After we pay the amount of trust that's going to be required to perform a riot in that specific location on the board, then and only then we are going to reveal all the famous citizens. Now the famous citizens are going to be revealed face up to the Great Machine, even if they were unidentified, and they're also going to be revealed to all the players. Now to see if the raid is successful, we're going to look at the current level of discontent, which we look over on the discontent track, and in this case we see the discontent level is currently at level 3. Then we're going to look at any revealed famous citizens who are at that level or lower, and we're going to compare them to the amount of traders and the guards. If there are more famous citizens at that level of discontent or lower with their number, more than the amount of guards plus traders, and the riot is going to be successful, and we're simply going to add a riot token to that location, and all active guards in that location are going to be broken. So just to show you in this example right here, we see that before this all happens, we know the discontent track is showing that all famous citizens at level 3 or lower are going to join the riot. We have a 3, a 3, and a 2. That means we have 3 famous citizens ready to join the riot right now. Plus we have 1 trader, and we happen to have 1 guard. So we have 3 famous citizens, 1 trader, 1 guard, so 3 is greater than 2. The riot is going to be successful, and all active guards in that location are going to become broken. But what happens if we fail to do so? For example, if the discontent track happens to be lower, and we currently only have discontent track of a level 2, meaning that famous citizens at level 2 or only level 1 are ready to join the rebellion, that means that the results are going to be just a little bit different for our heroes, because we're going to see that there is going to be 1 trader, 1 guard, and only 1 famous citizen is ready to join the rebellion. If the amount of guards plus traders is able equal to or greater than the amount of famous citizens, that means that riot is going to completely fail for our heroes. The biggest negative to the failed riot, though, is that anytime a riot fails, the master plan is going to go up by 1 level, and then immediately at any point during this immediate failure of the riot, the Great Machine can choose any of these famous citizens to arrest, and we can pick 1, 2, 3, all, some, or none, and we can take all these famous citizens and we can arrest them. Now we don't have to do so. For example, if that would be a level 5 one, we may not want to arrest them, but the basic idea is you're probably going to want to arrest them based on the basic strategies and the tactics you're playing as the Great Machine. That's basically how a riot works. Either the heroes have more, or they have more and the riot is going to be successful and they'll be closer to winning the game, or the Great Machine is going to have equal to or more than the amount of famous citizens, and the raid is going to fail, the master plan is going to go up, the Great Machine is going to be closer to winning, and all those famous citizens are going to be arrested. Obviously the trader is probably not going to be arrested. Well, maybe it will be. Depends on how the Great Machine feels. It could be part of the strategies, and there may be reasons you may want to do so. Now our heroes, just like the Great Machine's servants, are allowed to perform special actions in any of the great districts. In the minor districts, the only thing they can do is raise discontent. I've already explained how that works. I've showed you the card a little bit earlier how that works. But in all the major districts, our heroes can also perform actions. Now the first action we perform is going to be in the central square. And if we decide to perform an action or perform our action in the central square, basically what we are going to do is, much like the Great Machine, we are going to gain some resources. But instead of gaining bonds, we're going to gain trust. The amount of trust we're going to gain is going to be based on the amount of current famous citizens minus guards and minus traders who are available, and that's the amount of trust we're going to gain. So for example, if we have all these famous citizens who happen to be revealed for some special reason, we would gain a total of 3 trust right here, right now, because there's 1 guard and there happens to be 4 famous citizens, whether revealed or not. But if one of those famous citizens happened to be a trader, that trader would not provide any trust for us, so we would lose that amount of trust. The next thing a hero can do is they can be in the control nexus, and just like the Great Machine, they can move sections of the board around, have to follow the same rules, and the amount of cost it's going to cost is based on the amount of guards. It's 1 trust for every guard that has not broken the special section of the control nexus, but the control nexus also has a section action that our heroes can perform. Any hero in the control nexus can, instead of moving the board around, they can use their action to give any other hero 3 trusts. Again, respecting the limits that are available to all of our heroes. The next thing we're going to have is the Tower of Law. If a hero happens to be in the Tower of Law, they can take 1 of 2 actions in the Tower of Law. The first thing they can do is they can cancel any published directive. Now remember, canceled published directives are removed from the game, so that means the Great Machine no longer has access to that directive, which means it's going to limit their abilities and limit their powers. Next thing we can do in the Tower of Law with our heroes is we can retrieve any one of the forfeited access cards from our heroes before. And it doesn't have to be the hero who actually is in that location. It doesn't have to be one of their access cards. This hero can reveal another or return a different hero's access card back to that hero, allowing that hero to have extra abilities and extra actions, allow them to do different locations, returning some of their power and some of their mobility. Next thing we're going to have is we're going to have the Grand Citadel. If a hero happens to be in the Grand Citadel, they get one of two actions. They can choose and discard a directive from the Great Machine's hand, which means the Great Machine is going to fan out their hand, and the heroes are randomly going to pick those cards and are going to discard one of those cards. Next thing they can do is they can return a arrested citizen back to the district of their choice. Remember, arrested citizens are face down, so they're not going to know which famous citizen they're going to return, but they simply take that famous citizen and return it to any one of the locations on the board, but they're going to return to the board unknown, which means we got to use our action again to go ahead and identify a famous citizen to find out what that famous citizen happens to be. Finally, we're going to get to the closing phase. Now, during the closing phase, we're going to figure out a little bit of cleanup, and a couple different things are going to happen. The very first thing that's going to happen is any raids that failed. For example, we said this hero was sent to the control nexus, so that raid was successful, which means that action I explained earlier is going to occur. But any raids that are failed because no hero ended their turn in that location is going to cause the discontent to go up by 1 point. Next up, we're going to look at our city event card, and the city event card is going to say something at the end of the round. This is going to occur. We're simply going to make that occur, and then we're going to figure out if the master plan is going to successfully advance. And basically, that's going to occur based on various things, based on various different board states or various different decisions. Again, it's all going to be listed on these city cards. After we've done so, we're going to end the round, and we're going to start the next round of the game, playing through all the phases all over again, starting with the opening phase, going all the way through the closing phase. This is going to continue until either the master plan manages to get up to level 12 for the Great Machine, or the third raid happens to occur, whether it happens because the discontent gets up to here and we get our third raid, or if it happens to be the third raid is produced by our heroes and that team happens to win the game. That's a complete tutorial for how to play the City of the Great Machine. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I will definitely get to them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off the shelf board game reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll be sure to answer your emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoyed this video and if you enjoy the content I'm putting out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just $1 in the tip jar can help me cover my costs and help keep the channel growing strong. Remember, this channel is completely sponsor-free and self-funded, so $1 in tip jar really does make a great difference. If you enjoyed this video and this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching. Which is a conundrum, the countdown.